If you grew up with an N64 or a PlayStation 1, 3D platformers were probably in your blood. Games like Super Mario 64 really kickstarted the whole 3D platformer genre, which was huge at the time and continued to be huge for many years. Now, over on the Patreon page, I have a reward tier where you guys can basically tell me what video you want me to make. And Steve came up with a really good idea. He was talking about Super Mario Odyssey, and he was asking me if I thought, it was going to bring about the resurgence of the 3D platformer. And the more I thought about it, the more I kind of wanted to sort of explore where the platformer has come and gone, especially the 3D platformer, and sort of how the Nintendo Switch can help play into this. So thanks Steve for this video topic because it's really good. So we're going to talk about if Super Mario Odyssey is going to impact the 3D platformer market and bring it back to the top, where platformers have been, why they sort of disappeared in the later years, in the past, 5-10 years, and how the Nintendo Switch could play into this. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about this. Like I said, if you had an N64, you had a PlayStation 1, you know about 3D platformers. That's what you grew up on. That's what you played a hell of a lot of. I was 12 at the time of the release of the N64, and Super Mario 64 blew my 12-year-old mind. It was pretty much the game that showed 3D was here. Because at the time, it really, you coming off the Sega Genesis, coming off the Super Nintendo, you had all these amazing games on there, but 95% of them were 2D games due to hardware limitations. You had games like Wolfenstein and Doom on the Sega, on the Super Nintendo. You had Genesis with Zero Tolerance that showed glimpses of 3D, but the power wasn't there. And once the N64 came out and Super Mario 64 came out, and it showed how you could take a 2D game, transform it into a 3D genre now, and really make it still fluid and smooth and whatnot, like that just blew people's minds. And everyone sort of jumped onto the bandwagon when Super Mario 64 was such a big hit. You had 2D franchises from the Genesis, Super Nintendo era jumping into the 3D world. You had games like Earthworm Jim 3D on the N64. You had games like Bubsy 3D on the PlayStation. You had games like Sonic Adventure on the Sega Dreamcast. So like all of these franchises that were 2D were now making the transition into 3D because that's where it was. That's what kids wanted. They wanted technological advancements. And it's kind of funny thinking back on it because Top Hat Gaming Man, which is an excellent YouTube channel, I'll put his link in the description box down below. Definitely check him out, one of my favorite YouTubers, but keep in mind he's very satirical, he's very tongue-in-cheek, he plays a gimmick, he's also a pro wrestler, so he's a good actor. Just keep that in mind when you watch him, because some people just get so bent out of shape about what he says. But anyways, he made a very interesting tweet today talking about how he remembers British gaming magazines used to dock games for being 2D during that time frame because they weren't utilizing 3D technology. And it's funny because when you had all these old franchises that were going 3D, when you had new franchises coming out, games like Croc, Chameleon Twist, Bug, there was all sorts of games that were 3D platformers that were coming out. The best games from that time frame that held up the best were probably the 2D platformers. Games like Klonoa, games like Mischief Makers, games like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, all of those amazing Sega Saturn 2D games, Guardian Heroes and whatnot. Like, those games ended up really standing the test of time because 3D technology just became so fast and vastly dated in the years that came up because technology was moving so fast. So it's very interesting just to see how the gaming landscape shifted from this 2D to 3D mentality in this time frame as the power became available. This really carried on, honestly, into the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube era. You still had a ton of 3D platformers coming out, and then all of a sudden, PS3, Xbox 360, and Wii came out, and it was like, okay, we're done. We're not making platformers anymore. Everyone have a good night. And it was just like, where do they all go? Like, there was a few here and there, you know what I'm saying? But as a viable platform, as a viable genre, it just completely died. And it's interesting to think about. I guess maybe people just got a little bit tired of it. Maybe, game developers felt sort of limitations and restrictions. They felt maybe that, the platformer had gone as far as it could go. But aside from, a handful of releases on all three of those platforms, platformers became dead. And really, I think it wasn't till Shovel Knight came along that sort of started this resurgence of platformers. Granted, it started a resurgence of 2D platformers because all of a sudden everyone was making a 2D platformer. Being, you know, a part of Nintendo enthusiast during the Wii U era, we didn't have many retail games released, so we reviewed a lot of indie games, and I'm pretty damn sure there was one point in time where I reviewed like 5 2D platformers in a row. Don't get me wrong, there was a lot of great ones. Games like Shovel Knight, of course, games like The Adventures of Pip, games like Life of Pixel, like those were high quality 2D platformers. But once again, it was just like there were so many of them, and you're sitting back there, you're like, why is nobody doing a 3D platformer? You know, where are the 3D platformers? And then, you know, Yooka-Laylee came along. You had A Hat in Time that's been in development for a while. There was a ton of indie projects on the Wii U that were 3D platformers that never came to be. And, you know, you sort of see this resurgence coming, though. You know, you had the, Ratchet and Clank remaster, you have the Crash Twinsanity remaster, and you actually have a game called The Legend of Kay, which was another remaster that went pretty much unnoticed, but it was released on a variety of platforms, the Wii U included, which was originally a PS2 game that they remastered. It was a Capcom game originally, and Nordic got the rights to it, and that was a really fun game. I actually reviewed that myself, and I had a lot of fun with it, and I was like, man, I really do miss 3D platformers. And then there's been Mario. Mario has just been chilling in the background, like doing his own sort of thing. You know, games like Super Mario 3D World, Super Mario Galaxy were phenomenal games, but, you know, it wasn't really reinventing the wheel. Galaxy was just pretty much an extension to Super Mario 64, and Super Mario 3D World, while amazing, was still, you know, it wasn't that real advancement that we really wanted. And then comes along Super Mario Odyssey, and it's like, hey, you remember Super Mario 64? Well, it's on crack now, and we're just gonna go to all these different locations with all these different enemies, and you're gonna have this crazy hat that's gonna transform and put it on things, and that game is just blowing people's minds. So, we've come to the point now where we have to talk about, is the 3D platformer poised for a comeback because of games like Super Mario Odyssey? And I think it's very possible, but I think platform choice is still very important because a lot of PS4 games, I own a PS4, I own an Xbox One, I own a Switch, I own everything, okay? Let's get that out of the way. But I think a lot of PS4 owners and Xbox One owners maybe just don't want platformers that much. And, you know, I think a game like Sly Cooper could still do very well on the PS4 with that huge install base. But things like the Xbox One, it's never really been about platformers for that series, for that, you know, console or that brand in general. Like, the Xbox brand is still, you know, was around in like, what, 2000, 2001? Like, that was during the conception of it and the release of it. So I don't feel like there's that same sort of connection with platform games that there is on Nintendo platforms. And you can look at games like Wonder Boy, which sold better on the Switch than everything else combined. That's a 2D platformer that sort of shows you that. There's definitely hardcore platformer fans on all platforms, but I think the Nintendo Switch could actually help bring about the 3D platformer again, because people are buying the Nintendo Switch with this sort of thing in mind that, you know, video games are fun and easy again. Like, I love my Xbox One, I love my PS4, I don't love installing games on it every time I want to play a new game. It takes so long. With the Switch, you just pop in your cartridge, you might have an update, and then you're playing again. It's really bringing about sort of a retro feel, and I've mentioned this in other videos. You know, games like Blaster Master Zero are doing very well on the platform. Pretty much anything that sort of has a retro feel or has retro roots is doing well on the Switch. So I think you could end up seeing a lot of indie developers developing 3D platformers for the Nintendo Switch. You already have Super Mario Odyssey coming, you have Yooka-Laylee coming, which is obviously a very late version of the game, a game that received, you know, mostly positive, some mixed reviews here and there, but that's just sort of the Kickstarter, you know, stink, and that's for a whole nother video. But I do think that 3D platformers could make a comeback, and I think the Nintendo Switch could really help it if these indie developers get on board and, you know, explore the hardware and explore things like the HD Rumble and, you know, maybe even the motion controls, gyro controls, who the hell knows? But there's a lot you could do with the Nintendo Switch, and the portability aspect really plays into that. So Super Mario Odyssey could potentially be a catalyst. It's going to be one of the biggest selling games of 2017. It's going to be one of the highest rated games of 2017, and it's going to move a lot of Nintendo Switch units. So I think that sort of positive momentum for 3D platformers could really catapult them back, and maybe you'll see returns of old franchises come back in 3D platformers. Maybe you'll see, you know, new franchises pop up in the 3D platformer world. There's definitely still a world for platformer games, whether it be 2D or 3D, and I think Super Mario Odyssey will end up helping that, you know, immensely in the long run. So I guess that's about it. I guess that's about all I really wanted to say on the subject. I just wanted to sort of cover, you know, the history of the platformer, you know, especially the 3D platformer, where it's been, where it could go, and, you know, it was a fun topic. I want to thank Steve for, you know, throwing this topic to me. Had a really good time, you know, thinking about it and sort of planning this video out in my head. And thank you for checking out this video. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comment section down below what some of your favorite 3D platformers are. And if you're excited to see 3D platformers potentially come back with the success of Super Mario Odyssey. And yeah, thanks for checking out this video. I'll catch you guys next time. Later.
RGT 85. RGT 85. RGT 85.